Good afternoon. So I think we'll start our OMS webinar, but before we do some housekeeping rules. So just to tell you that this session is currently being recorded. Throughout the session, there will be in the footnote, you'll see the code to access the Slido. If you have any questions, please use this tool. We'll not be monitoring the WebEx chat, and any hands raised will not be able to take it. So if you have any questions, please place them in Slido and we'll take it at the end of the session. We've reserved a couple of minutes to go over any questions offline. We're going to have a couple of colleagues helping me addressing some of the questions. The ones that we have not addressed, I will take it at the end of the session. Of course, you can use this Slido if you choose to. You can place your question anonymously and also address it. To use this Slido, you can either go to the website or just by scanning this QR code. You can. Everyone will be placing their own question. Of course, if you see that you have a question, the same question, you can add a thumbs up, and we'll see the prioritization. Of course, the more thumbs up, there will be the ones that will come on top. Just to tell you that, of course, we'll take any OMS related questions. If there is any question that actually relates to another business unit, we're happy to take it offline and to share internally with our colleagues so that they can further assist. After the webinar, we'll take into consideration the questions that you've placed in this platform, and we will improve our OMS FAQ document that is currently published in the OMS portal. So now, without further ado, starting our presentation. Okay, so good afternoon. Thank you for joining our OMS webinar today. My name is Deborah Martins Braga. I'm currently the OMS business lead, and I'm going to guide you today throughout the OMS presentation. So today's presentation is part of our sport week, where a couple of presentations had already been delivered. We are halfway there. There's more coming until the end of the week. So in the morning we had the RMS presentation, and now in the afternoon I'll guide you through the OMS presentation. The goals of these sessions, of course, will continue as what we've been doing for the past 3 years with our OMS webinars. Our goal is always to increase the awareness on OMS activities. We'll share with you also some planned activities that we have for the upcoming months, and to show you how OMS took into consideration the feedback that we receive from our customers. So, and we're gonna do this in different stages. So I will start with a brief introduction on OMS. I'll guide you through a couple of OMS processes, not to forget the OMS change request process, which is the gateway for users to change the OMS data. I'll show you a bit more about the OMS data quality management, the process that we have, and what we do on a day-to-day basis. Some statistics reference to the past couple of years and where are we today. Also, I will leave you a couple of very useful links on that you can consult at your own time about OMS documentation and what's the best platforms and where you can get in contact with us. Also showing you some of the OMS projects where OMS sees in terms of projects and other systems. And last but not least, show you what are we doing, what do we aim to do in the upcoming months, and at the end some keynotes that would like you to take from today's webinar. So jumping into OMS, into a couple of introductions, starting with some of our OMS key principles, not to forget that OMS dictionary aims to provide a central source of organization and location data. This is hosted by EMA and is currently accessible throughout, not currently accessible not only internally for EMA, but also to external stakeholders. Anyone that has access to our OMS portal, the data that we publish is public and accessible to anyone. In OMS, an organization, when we talk a record, we can have two elements, organization and location detail. When we talk about an organization, we manage this as a legal entity, and we group all its physical locations depending on a country or a certain jurisdiction. We do not capture in OMS any roles. We do not capture any context if it's used for human or pet purpose. And OMS is also not the place to maintain any department information. And one example of this is the record of our European Medicine Agency, which used to be in a different country. And for that reason, when we look at OMS, what we see it may look a duplicate, but it's not, because we're talking a different org ID, a different country, and each of them have their own location associated. In terms of what I was referring to, departments. So departments we do not keep, but we understand that there may be a couple of business units that need to be captured, so to facilitate the communication, and this we can maintain it in OMS, and we can publish under our alternative name field. How is the data organized? So the organization data is structured with unique IDs. There is one ID associated to the organization, and another ID associated to the location, and we can have a couple of mappings of previously used systems. So to put our OMS together, we use a couple of internal systems, and we maintain some of those mappings. And some of those they are public. You can see it in our portal, and it's not something that the external user can use on the day-to-day way, especially when we talk other GMDP site code. Not all of them in other GMDP are accessible, but this is the reason why they are there. They are the source of our OMS dictionary. And this related still with how we maintain the data, and related with the legal entity type, what we did is, for example, if we look at an organization that used to exist, we used to see in one of the consuming systems more than 20 lines for the same organization. What we did is we mastered the data as per what is available in the National Business Registry, and any department information and the assembling lines, it's something that is not maintained at OMS level. So what we see today is we can have all this available in Spore Portal, but all of them belong to the same mastered record. OMS always publishes the latest version of the data. This version, OMS detained the version, a history version of the data. This is easily accessible by using the OMS portal. We can never go back to a previous version. OMS will always publish the latest version of the data. The lock IDs, they will be unique, and a practical example of this is when we can have multiple legal entities actually using the same physical location, but because they are linked to a different organization, to a different legal entity, they will have its own location ID. And last but not least, as the name states, OMS manages organizations, OMS manages legal entities, and any individuals that may have an active role in a regulatory procedure, they will not be maintained directly in OMS. Now that we've seen the key principles, we've seen that OMS has all sorts of organizations. We can have manufacturers, we can have sponsors, we can have universities. All these to OMS, as we said, those roles they're not captured in OMS, but it's data that is relevant to be there. And who can change OMS data? Who can create this data in OMS? So OMS will see this in a couple of slides. But in a nutshell, there are a couple of roles to access the Spore data and to change, that will allow users to change the OMS data. But not to forget that any user that has a Spore role can change any of the OMS data available. They can create an organization, they can update the location of an organization that they're not affiliated to. This was done on purpose to facilitate the user experience. Of course, in our validation process, any change request that is submitted to us, as part of the change request validation, we always ask for the supporting documentation so that we can validate, we can check the accuracy of the data, and if the data is real, then we will successfully approve the change request. We've been talking about the key principles, and another principle that we cannot forget is that OMS is a standardized list of organization and location details. OMS, of course, I talked about the supporting documentation. This is crucial. OMS, in the sense that OMS uses those supporting documentation to validate the data, to ensure that the data is correct and it actually exists. We use these documents to do this validation, but the change request process has two main steps: the validation process. Second one is the standardization process. And here, OMS aims to reflect the reality and not a copy of the supporting documentation. In this sense, we aim to publish the correct organization name and the correct legal entity, the correct relationship with its addresses, and the correct physical location. And exactly, we've touched base these two last points, that OMS will always standardize the data. There are a couple of differences that you you may see if there is a dot, if there is a comma, but as long as we have the same representation of the data, this should not cause any problems in any of the regulatory procedures. And here, something that I've mentioned as part of the not only the change request process, but as part of the data validation when a user is performing all types of tasks before publishing, before approve any record, either organization or location, there are two main steps. There is first of them the validation, and the second one the standardization according to our OMS data quality rules. For organizations, of course, we use our standards. This has been a document that has been extensively improved. We've been putting together this document since the go live, since 2016. We've consulted with each jurisdiction what are the rules per country, and this is how this document came into life. When we talk location, we actually have to support embedded in our system. We count with the support of each national postal service. So to help us standardize the data, not only standardize, but also assure that it's a real physical location, and it's something that is locally recognized. In the cases where the address may not be recognized by the National Postal Service, where we have, for example, a PO box, or for some reason the information is not available, we will standardize according to our OMS data quality standards. Talking a little bit more about this National Postal Service and the files, because this is a major part of our data quality standards. So exactly what do we have here? So this address doctor is an address library and is used for address validation, correction, and, as I said, standardization. Is a worldwide system, and it's populated with more than 240 information from more than 240 countries, and it has all this information combined in one single engine. Addresses are with this system. We assure that addresses will be formatted according to the local standards, and we ensure that the right elements will appear in the appropriated fields. This database, it's updated throughout the year, so we're constantly receiving updates, and sometimes even corrections. And this service allows us to enrich addresses also with geo coordinates, and to support with different character sets. For example, when we talk non-English speaker countries, this tool actually creates, of course, the main data in OMS is always captured in English character sets, but when the information is recognized by the National Postal Service, child records, for when we talk location, alternative location will be created, meaning we will have in the system the main location will be in English, but we will be able to see an address localized, this is what we call it, with the local character sets. Moving on into OMS process and multiple activities that OMS is involved with. So we have two main groups. We have our OMS data stewardship and the customer service. Under the data stewardship, we have the change requests, where we handle change requests that are submitted by our OMS users. They are submitted through our OMS portal to update or to create any of the existing records. Other type of activities we also perform. We can have a couple of deltas. We do some enrichments. We can also perform mapping activities. In terms of customer service, also placed by our OMS users, we can handle requests for information, requests for service when it's not possible to, when a certain functionality is not available in OMS portal, users can use our customer service platform. And this is the system that we use to handle all types of incidents logged by our OMS users. In terms of data quality and service management, this lands under our business lead or product owner. In terms of when we talk data quality management, we have a couple of different groups. We do quality control, where we're sampling a couple of activities performed by the data steward. We have more, apart from the quality control, we also do some data profiling, where we monitor, investigate across the entire data. We also do some quality assurance, where it leads us to the assessment of the root cause of a certain incident, and it leads to our process improvements. In terms of service management, we also do a bit of service coordination, where we handle with data governance and IT delivery system. And last but not least, performance management, where we're going to see in a couple of slides. Where we do KPI reporting and the assessment of the customer satisfaction. Moving forward into the change request process. And in a nutshell, high-level overview, the requester can submit a change request to create or update any of the data, regardless of its affiliation, directly using the OMS portal. Always very important not to forget the supporting documentation. Once this change request is logged into the system, EMA Data Steward will analyze the request. And at this stage, it's important to note that the organization name and the location will be validated using the National Business Registry or other sources, depending on the jurisdiction. And this will be done against the documentation submitted. And when the validation is successfully done, the data will then be standardized following our OMS data quality rules and what we've seen, the address doctor tool. After the assessment, the change request can either be approved or rejected, and the user, for this last case, to both of them, the user will always receive an acknowledgement email with the outcome of the change request. In case the change request is rejected, the user will also, in this acknowledgement email, receive a brief justification and a possible guidance for a future successfully approve of a change request. If the data is approved, if the change request is approved, the data will be automatically visible. It will take less than 10 seconds to be visible in your OMS portal. The SLAs, they are defined based on the type of change request that is submitted. This information is also available in our OMS portal, depending on the type of change. But in average, we address our change requests within the first 5 working days. In terms of the submission, for those that never came across with our OMS platform, this is the look and feel of our change request form. There are a couple of fields that they are mandatory. Of course, never to forget at the right hand side, this is where you attach the supporting documentation that will help us later on with the validation of the change request. The update change request form is fairly similar. Of course, when we're doing an update, there will be a couple of fields that will be already pre-populated, but again, never forget to populate information that is marked with a red asterisk. This is the mandatory information. And once you submit, you need to tick this little box here, even though it appears at the end, but this box is very important because any information that is approved by our OMS data stewards, it will be later publicly available in our OMS portal. And we've been talking about supporting documentation. I'm going to leave you here. This is our guidance, where you can find very detailed tables that, depending on not only on the jurisdiction, meaning if we're talking an EEA organization or a non-EEA organization, and also considering the type of change that the user is trying to perform in our OMS portal. This is very important to consult this document before you submit your change request to have a successfully approved change request at the first time. And taking back to one of the OMS key principles, when we talk creating an organization, always the best documentation is going to be an extract from the business registry. This is the place that we use to validate our information. When we talk public entities, we acknowledge, and we've captured this in our OMS data quality standards. Those entities, they will not be available in the National Business Registry, and with those exceptions, we accept the headed letter. We will later on always validate this information before publishing the record. And we've been talking about validation and standardization, but I'd like to share with you 2 practical cases, one on exactly how does this happen in the back end for organization level, and the second one for location level. And we have here a case of an organization. So the user submits the change request. With the organization, we can clearly identify at this point that we have organization name and a second part where we identify that this is the legal entity type. At this point is very important to distinguish these 2 values because our OMS data quality standards have these 2 points into consideration. And how does this happen? So first we do the validation. As we've been mentioning, very important, the supporting documentation so that we can see the organization name. Once we have this documentation, we use it to search in our sources. In this case, would go to the National Business Registry to verify that this organization is still registered. It's registered with this name, and it's registered with an active status, that it has not been inactivated, it has not ceased to exist. After the validation, we go, once the validation is a success, we go into the standardization part of the process, where we consult our OMS data quality standards. And at this point, it's important to go back to that point where we segregate the name into organization name and legal entity type, because organization name will be standardized according to the taking majority of them are standardized in title case, unless we have a certain acronyms or we have other indication, a trademarks that they need some capitalization. This today is also taken into consideration, but the rule is the organization name will be in title case, and the legal entity type will be standardized as per the OMS data quality standards. Here, there's, in terms of when we look standardization of the name, today we have a bit more flexibility. However, when we talk standardization of the legal entity type, we will be using how it's been defined in our OMS data quality standards. And of course, even though the user submitted this way, we're not going to reject the change request. What we do is we approve the change request and we apply our OMS data quality standards to the name. In this case, we'll never use another type of legal entity. We consider the legal entity type that has been submitted in the change request. We simply standardize the way of writing the same legal entity type. When we look at the same two steps for the address, and here we have the add-in of our National Postal Service. So the change requests come into our system. Data steward does the first step of the assessment, which is the validation against the supporting documentation and the source system, in this case, the National Business Registry. We see that the data is the same, okay? So we move on into the second step, which is the standardization. And here, with one single click, we are able to standardize and to rewrite the location according to the local standards. And one of the standards that we have in our OMS data quality rules is that the location will not capture any other details apart from the address itself. So if a certain organization is using another facility, in this case that is actually represented by a different legal entity type, this will not be captured at location level. Only address details will be retained in our dictionary. So in terms of rejection, I already briefly mentioned this, that a change request that is rejected for some reason, either because they did not follow our OMS rules, the user will always receive an email acknowledgement with a rejection reason code. This is just a small, just one or two words that classify the rejection, and then a more extensive comment with the justification why this change request is being rejected, and if needed, further guidance where the user could use for a successful approve of the next change request. Unfortunately, and as we speak, OMS still does not have the return functionality. So before you submit the change request, it's very important not to forget to attach the supporting documentation, or to make sure that all the relevant data is being populated because unless this is done before the submission of the change request, you will not be able to submit more changes or a second change request unless our OMS data stewards pick up and close that change request. So this is very important because our records are limited to one change at a time, meaning if we have 3 users trying to update an organization name, only the first user will be able to do it. And imagine that this user forgets the supporting documentation. You'll have to, in worst case scenario, you'll have to wait 5 working days until we process the change request. And only then you will be able to submit again the change request with the supporting documentation. So this is the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, OMS, the change request is approved. And when this happens, as I mentioned, the data is published automatically in our OMS portal. And to most of OMS consuming systems, the data will be available within the hour. So we've seen the change request process. Now going into another big part of our activities, because we've performed a lot of changes. We've been talking about data quality standards. It's very important for us to assure to maintain the high level of data quality in our system, and this assessment is basically done by 2 ways: proactive way and a reactive way. This reactive way, we count with the support of our users. Users can use our customer service platform to log any issues. If they come across with any issues, of course, this will lead to a mark of a data quality defect, and we will immediately correct this defect, this error. Errors, they are classified, we're going to see this in a couple of slides. They can be classified as a major or minor, depending on the severity of this. In case we have a major error, we can it can be classified when we come across with a duplicate, or for example, in case we incorrectly approve or reject a change request. But we'll see this in a couple of slides. We've seen the reactive way, looking into a more proactive way. How do we have a couple of processes that help us that contribute to a high level of data quality to our OMS dictionary. One of them through our quality control processes. So we do a sample of all the tasks that we perform, either change request or customer service calls, or even data service activities. All of them are sampled and inspected to identify, to detect any possible errors. This is the first step. Later on, they are re-inspected. So we do a second sample where we do a calibration of all the quality control results. So this is the active, what we call it, the active monitoring. Then we have also another part, another system that help us which is, we count with the support of this data profiling. We have OMS have by now an extensive a list of scorecards where we use it to profile our OMS rules. So what we did is we embedded in the system our OMS data quality rules, and any record that is created that deviates from those rules will be prompt and will be corrected in the following day. So this is an activity that we do daily and weekly, depending on the type of errors. If it's a major error, we have the activity to be performed daily. If it's a minor error, we have a very few actually that happen weekly. Most of them today are happening daily. And last but not least, we've covered. I've mentioned this in the previous slide. This process, of course, help us. We do once with the result of all this process, we do a root causes. We analyze the root causes of all the errors, and this is how is following this analysis that it leads us to do an assessment of a couple of process or even rules, and assure that we do a continuous process improvement. So all these activities, looking at more practical sense on OMS, and for the last year, so we've performed a high number of change requests, which, looking at the data service tasks that we do, it's still not the same numbers, but we always do the same 20% sampling. We identify those errors and we correct them as we go. In this proactive check, of course, we continue to find those errors, but when we look at the high level overview, they are not that a major. There are few errors that we found them, but it's not a significant number, and the data quality is expected to be good, looking at the percentage of error that we find. We have been talking about major and minor errors. I'll just leave you here the information about those errors and how do we classify all those errors. Of course, we have two major groups, if it's a minor or a major error. A major error, in a nutshell, it's something that has a direct impact, a direct negative impact for user. We call it a minor error, something that is just an improve that we should do something, because, for example, if in case we break or we did not follow our OMS data quality standards, so the data is still there. It's just a matter of having the correct details available. When we talk a major error, it has a higher impact on OMS system, but mostly at the consuming system level, where, for example, in case we publish something that it should not have been approved, or in case we create a duplicate. So these are a couple of examples of major errors, and we classify these errors, of course, based on not only on the type of task, if it is a data service task or if it's a change request, but also depending on the type of error, if it's a data quality error or if it's a processing error. A couple of slides, we've talked about the data profiling, but just to share with you just to share with you more information about this data profiling. So we have profiles built in our system where we write our roles in the system, and any information that does not follow those rules, there will be prompt in a dashboard. We'll see how many errors do we have, and this is something that is constantly monitored, and the prioritization is done um, from a color coding. In this case, you only see greens, but in the case that we have different color coding, and this color coding happens depending on how many valid rows we have there. So if we have something that is red, these will be our priorities. It means that we have too many errors, and we need to prioritize this. In this case, we still have a couple of corrections or records to validate. But this is how we prioritize the data. We start with the cluster that has more errors, we fix it, and then we move on to the ones that still identify as an error. And this, how can we say, how can we assure the data that the data quality of OMS data is high? So this is done also using the same data profiling tool. We use a couple of data quality attributes to classify our OMS data quality. And some of these attributes we count as accuracy in case it reflects the reality, or if it's something that it's impossible to validate. We use also uniqueness in case to identify if there is any duplicates or not. Conformity to tell us if our data is using or not the rules that we advertise, if there is any conflicting information, or in case there's any information that may be missing. Moving on into the statistics, to share a little bit, to share with you how we've been performing. So for the past year, we noticed a significant increase in the number of organizations, not only organization, but also location. And this was mainly due to the mandatory use of OMS in UPD and other GMDB and CTIS, which became mandatory early 2022, sorry. And starting with the task that have the big visibility and the direct impact to the user. So we have the change request. And last year, we noticed a significant increase, but this year, we've already noticed a significant increase between 20 and 21, but between 21 and 22 was a nearly 4 times more change requests that we handle. And as I said, due to the mandatory use of OMS in a couple of consuming systems. But despite this peak, this significant increase, we were able to maintain our SLAs, or even improve, because we, between 2021 and 2022, we during last year, we actually processed all change requests within the established SLA. However, when we look at the change request by status, we still have a significant number of rejected change requests. This is definitely something that this is our focus. We aim to improve in this sense, because it leads to more work, not only internally, but also more frustration to external users, and we'll definitely want to decrease this number. This is something that we've been able to decrease for the past years, but we continue working towards decreasing um, the number of rejected change requests. And here we focus mostly on the supporting documentation, and I've been mentioning this since the beginning, and this is the reason why, because half of our rejected change requests, they are due to the missing supporting documentation. That's why you have been hearing over and over again. So comparing with 2021, we actually already work, comparing with 2021. Last year, we were able to decrease in 60% the number of missing supporting documents change requests. But in the future, we want to reduce this number even further, and we are working towards developing a new functionality, which is a return functionality, instead of straightforward rejecting a change request just because the user probably forgot to submit the documentation. And this way, we will give the chance to the user to review the change request and provide the necessary supporting documentation. So we've seen this significant increase at change request level. However, when we look at the holistic view of the OMS activities, the change request is just a very small chunk of our all activities. The OMS activity that actually takes more space is still the data services. So these data services, we had near 2 times more volumes comparing with the previous year. And this was due to the conclusion of the integration with the 3GMDP. This was a very extensive activity that we started in 2021 and we concluded last year. We've also implemented the daily synchronization with SME database. So this is happening daily, and the SAP integration was already there, but we moved from weekly integration into daily integration. We have been a new activity that we also started last year, and I will give you more detail in a couple of slides, which we call it's a currency checked activity. So in a nutshell, what we do here is we look into records that have not been updated for the past 2 years. And last year, it was the first time we did this assessment. We went over more than 24,000 records, and it led to the deactivation of more than 20% of those records. So this year, we are again doing the same thing due to the success of this data cleansing activity. And last but not least, our so famous data profiling, where we review any record that is not following our rules, and it's a continuous activity to assure that we are following the rules that we advertise. And we've seen 2 of our OMS activities. We're just missing the last one. Comparing with the whole holistic overview of OMS, it's the smallest bit, but even though it was, we've seen an increase of nearly 3 times more than the previous year. This again due to the mandate use of a couple of new systems consuming OMS on a mandatory base. And not only this, there was also with the new customer service platform coming into life, we've noticed the way we handle the data slightly changed, and we've noticed that at least in the last 2 quarters when this tool went live, over 40% of the calls were wrongly created. And in this case, you probably participated in yesterday webinar where my colleague shared that every time something like this happens, what we do is we let the user know that the call was created under the wrong category, and following this, the user receives a communication that we will be creating another call on behalf of the user under the correct category. However, even with this nearly 3 times more increase, looking at the overview of all OMS activities, when we've seen that in these numbers, what it increased, it was in terms of data quality questions. We received near 4 times more data quality questions in comparison with the previous year, and more questions in relation with the system, how to navigate, how to operate in the system, how to create a change request. This was the significant number of tickets that we handle. And again, even with this increase, we were able to improve our SLAs. And even with this improve in terms of responsive time, when we look at the number of IT incidents logged due to technical issues, we may need the intervention from IT colleagues, which may lead to a delay in the resolution of a couple of tickets. But looking at the overview of all these numbers that we've seen, is just represents only 2% of the whole OMS activities. And here we're considering that the whole number of tickets that we received will be incidents, but they were not incidents. And this is reflected when we look into perspective of those numbers. Today we have more than 76,000 locations, more than 45,000 organization records, more than 14,000 users, and we go into only 135 data quality incidents, looking into the whole OMS world. We're actually talking less than 1% incidents detected per user, and 0.1 incidents looking at the whole volume that we have in our dictionary. And in terms of customer satisfaction, following the survey that took place at the end of last year, what we've seen, the results that we've received, is that both in terms of data service and data quality, OMS was positively rated, and with an overall 70% as good, or classify OMS data service and data quality as good or excellent. Moving now into OMS documentation and which different type of platforms can you access where can you find all different type of documentation. There are a couple of links and places to access this type of information. So first of all, our OMS portal, where you'll have all manuals, guidance, and standards. This is the place to find all our OMS documents. In addition to this, you can access our training channel, where we have a couple of videos with tips and tricks previously raised by the user. To access, very important that we've been seeing OMS portal, but to actually access our OMS portal, you may need to use the EMA account management portal in case you need to set up different type of roles. Another platform that it can be used, which is the EMA corporate website, where you have a general review of SPOR and OMS, a brief introduction, and last but not least, our EMA service desk platform, where we use to clarify any questions and to address any issues and even requests. What we've seen, EMA corporate website. What can you find there? There you can find some background information, not only in SPOR, but also in about OMS. You can find information about SPOR project and the OMS vision. In terms of access, this is done using another platform, the EMA account management. What can you find there? In this platform, you can find a guidance about the access, not the OMS itself, but about the access, detailed information, and how to request a role. There will be in our SPOR week, there will be a dedicated webinar where our colleagues from EMA account management, they will present and give you more information about the system itself. OMS documentation available in the OMS portal. So by now you've seen that is a very extensive list, but we try to organize it by category, and as you've seen, we've been using the alphabet to organize the data depending on the type of document that we're talking about. So at the beginning, you'll see documentation that refers to OMS service and statistic. This is, for example, where you'll be able to find the slides that are being displayed today. So within a week's time, we'll be creating a new document in the OMS portal using the slides that I'm sharing here. The second group that we have is process guidance. So here is where you find what we've been talking about, the OMS data quality rules, the OMS Bible, where you can find all the rules that we use either at organization or location level. There were a couple of webinars that were delivered also in this sense. Information about the change request process, and also here in this group, last but not least, web user manual on very detailed, extensive screenshots on how to use the system, where to click it. All this documentation is available at any point for the user to. It just need to go to OMS portal, and all this information is there. Second group OMS consuming system, relevant information about OMS and the standards that uh, we use. In terms next group, we have a couple of presentations, a summary of the last two customer satisfaction surveys that we did. We have after this the guidance in terms of registration, because this is managed in a different system, but we maintain the latest version of the data also in our MS portal, just to facilitate the user experience. And last but not least, any information about API access. And this is going to be another webinar as part of our OMS week, as part of our SPOR week. So these are all the documents that we have there, but I would just like to leave you a different view of those same documents. So when you go into our OMS document section, this is something that it's useful. It's a new document that we've created. This is a document that we constantly updated with new features that we release, upcoming features or discussions that are taking place, data quality rules that change. This is the go-to document to understand what has been happening with OMS for the couple of months, what changed. This will be the summary, let's say, of the last activities from OMS. But looking at the process and from a more practical sense, we're just leaving you here a couple of key documents that are available there, especially looking at all different stages that the user may be. So before a user uses OMS, there are a couple of documents that we highlighted as relevant documents. One of them, it's a very good quick initiation process flow. This, of course, it's a summary of all the process that we have, but it's a very good document for new users that have no idea what is OMS, where to go, what it's needed. This, to me, it's one of the best documents that a new OMS user can consult. Of course, we have other that go into more information, but all of them are equally important to go over before any contact with OMS. Then we have a couple of highlighted documents that provide information in terms of access. Now, in terms of data quality, we've been talking, and this is always our focus, our OMS data quality standards. And in terms of change request process, this is a tool that the OMS users use more. We have OMS user manual with extensive screenshots, very user friendly. Our OMS change request, where this is the document with tables that give you exactly the type of supporting documentation that you need to submit depending on the type of change request. Again, at this point, even is it duplicated, but at this point is again very important to consult OMS data quality standards so that you have visibility on what's going to happen. And last but not least, our SLAs. Other support, when we move into more the help side. So if you go into EMA YouTube channel, by now you have significant number of OMS videos from previous webinars, and last but not least, our customer service portal which we now it's called Service Now. It has a different look and feel from the previous one, but it's organized um, by application, and the OMS can be found under the SPOR application, where you will be able to create a request for OMS, report an issue, um, and to ask a question. It's outside the SPOR application. You just simply log a question directly from the ServiceNow dashboard, and it will reach out to us. Look, moving now into the OMS, where uh, is OMS by now? So OMS is already taking an active role in a couple of systems, and already available in both domains. Um, already available throughout the whole life cycle of the medicine. There are two. Don't want to go into much detail, but just two new upcoming stars where OMS, for you to keep an eye, OMS will include these two new system and projects in the upcoming future. But looking into EMA and EU systems, OMS is already mandatory in most of them. So you probably recognize all of these EMA managed systems. Not to forget that the data that we publish and consequentially, because it will be used by each of these systems, they're not going to be a copy of your supporting documentation. There will be a standardized list of that documentation, and one record will be used depending on its role. Any details such as manufacturing line, department, these again will not be captured in OMS, and if needed, it can be maintained at consuming system level. And this just to say that how OMS is used in this process is still the biggest challenge. And OMS and alongside with the key user group continues to collect any relevant questions to prepare new dedicated FAQs for each of these processes, because even though there can be common questions across all the systems, but each of them have their own specific tweaks. And this, of course, towards try to clarify some our data quality standards and how we use them. And this already, just to tell you that we already published. The first one that we start was on INI alongside with our EAF colleagues, while we continue towards creating more detailed FAQs for each of these systems. Moving on into the planned OMS activities. It's going to be a busy year, so there are a couple of activities that we want to do at a customer service. We continue the process improvement. Would like to more towards the end of the year. Would like to increase our quality control and quality assurance, and would like to focus and reviewing our customer support, the answers that we provide, and improve in this sense. To provide, this was something that we got from the SPOR survey. In terms of data management, we aim to implement EV to OMS deltas. What this will do is have EV sending us any new organization or location that may be created in the system. We will not be implementing a feedback loop. You will be just EV connecting and sending information to OMS and not the other way around. This is also to support the upcoming PMS go live. In terms of data quality, this is always a must in our day-to-day tasks. As I mentioned, one of the activities, and in the next slide I'll give you more information about this, the currency check. What we do is we start with the EV. We create a cluster of this currency. We start with any marketing authorization holders that we have in OMS, and then we move on into all the other organizations. Another point that we decided to do starting this quarter is revise our data quality targets, and this another point that I'll show you next. So this always working towards maintaining our OMS data quality, high level of data quality. Documentation always something that we continue working on. So last year we published the first version of the new items documents. We have a couple of new documents that we want to create new documents. We want to create a new a document that guides the user amongst all the OMS documents. By now is a very extensive list. We would like to create this index, this support to our users. Working on exactly this, we've mentioned as part of the customer service. We're going to work with the key user group to collect experience from customer support that we have provided, and how can we improve. We're going to be working with the key user group to help us review and improve our customer support, and that towards the end of the year possibly publish a new document in terms of OMS data management, how we manage the data, how is the system working, especially in terms of merges, how is this taking place today, and what to expect when we do a merge in OMS. In terms of awareness, so today we are this week we are in the SPOR week. Toward at the end of the year, we're gonna have another OMS webinar, and afterwards a new customer survey that we hope to have your feedback on how can we improve, because we always consider information that you provide to us via this customer service, and to look into our daily activities and where can we improve to accommodate your comments. In terms of modernization, in modernization of our system, so we started the year with a big upgrade in our roles. This is another point that I will show you also still today, so not losing time here. So, and for the second part of the year, because the initial part of the year we have our IT colleagues looking only into improvements at infrastructure and technical, so that because we've seen that system is not always the most responsive one, and we've agreed that the first part of the year we are dedicated improving this, and then second part of the year we'll continue with OMS improvements, bug fix, the return functionality that I've mentioned in the previous slide, and other improvements such as create a flag to identify a headquarter, and also display the National Business Registry number, which we have been already enriching our dictionary. This is actually already accessible using the OMS export, but this is not yet visible in our portal, and we want to make this visible, not only visible in our portal, but also allow users to maintain this using the change request functionality. Now, looking into these 3 points that we have here. So I've already touched base in this currency check. What we did so this activity started last year. It was a very successful activity. It led to the deactivation of a lot of records. So this year we decided to again to continue with this activity. This year we have less records, but it's an activity that's still ongoing, and by the end of the year I'll be able to give you more information on how many records we deactivated with this currency. This currency is done by us at the organization level, and this is happening because this is the only attribute that we can validate ourselves, because we use our reference sources in terms of location, because we know that not all locations are available in our reference sources. In this case, for example, the National Business Registry. Here we ask for the support of companies. Every time there is a location that is no longer in use by a certain organization, please create a change request with the supporting documentation to deactivate that location. This, not to forget that this is to be performed not because a certain regulatory procedure no longer uses the location. This is not the case. To deactivate the location should only happen when that certain organization is no longer active in that location. And why is it important for us to ask you for your help in this sense, and to even ourselves to continue with this currency check to ensure that what we have in OMS is current, and to prevent any organization that has ceased to exist as a legal entity are incorrectly used in a certain regulatory procedure, and to, of course, to simplify the process that rely on our OMS currency, such as, for example, the fee collection activities. How do we do this? As I mentioned, we collect records that have not been updated for the past year. We review, we create a new version of the record as a way of stamping the record. And what is the impact for you on this activity? So when we all look into our dictionary, you are helping us ensuring that OMS has current data, and this is fairly easy, fairly straightforward using the change request functionality. So if you know that an organization ceased to exist as a legal entity, please create a change request um, with this information. If you know that an organization is no longer using a certain location um, to do business, if they are no longer operating in that physical place, please create a change request to deactivate that location. Not because a certain regulatory procedure is no longer happening. No, only when uh, the company no longer operates in that physical address. Uh, Looking at another point that we had as the plan activities, uh, and which was to revise our data quality targets. So this it was what we were working towards, looking at OMS services over time, and we're looking since 2019, where we see for minors we proposed to work under 20% of minor errors, and both at data service and change request we have been reporting way under this threshold. The same behavior we've been seeing for major errors, where we've proposed to address uh, under 10% of major errors. And again, since 2019, this has been it's a decreasing trend, both for service, data service, and change request. So looking at this, we've seen that for the past 4 years, um, this has consistently been under um, both thresholds. So what we propose that from now on, moving forward, we will be targeting to perform any major errors always less than 5%, and any minor errors always less than 10%. Um, one of the one of the technical improvements that we released early this year um, was an upgrade of unaffiliated for unaffiliated rule. And at this point, it's very important to highlight that this change happened only for OMS. So this information that I'm sharing here with you is only applicable for OMS, even though when we talk about roles, we talk spore roles, but depending on the domain that we're looking at, each role have their own have a certain access to all type of activities. And here in this slide, you see what each role has access in OMS and OMS on. So why did we do this? So we did this to simplify, following our customers' feedback. So we did this to simplify the requirements of any new OMS user. So Spore unaffiliated users had limited access to change request functionality. They were limited to one pending create organization change request at a time, and they were unable to do anything else. So what we did is we did an upgrade of this Spore unaffiliated rule. And how is this happening? So any OMS user that has an EMA account, this is very important. The user need to have an EMA account. And as long as you have an EMA account, you will be automatically assigned a Spore unaffiliated role, and immediately you can create, update any of the OMS records. You don't need to be affiliated. You don't need to do anything else. You just need to go to EMA account management, create an account, go back to OMS portal, log in, and automatically you will be able to submit an OMS change request. Of course, the success of that change request being approved, it always depends on all the requirements that we've seen in the previous slides. At this point, no changes took place to the other records, to the other roles. They maintain the same access and that they had before. So, in a nutshell, impact to our users. In OMS, any user that has this spore and affiliated role now has the same permissions and can perform exactly the same activities as the spore user role, and no changes to the spore industry to the spore super user. This role still is required to manage any users of a certain organization. And last but not least, just to leave you a couple of conclusions and takeaway from today's session. So always always working towards increased awareness on OMS. So we've reviewed some of the OMS key principles, the OMS change requests. We've went over some of the OMS processes, and to highlight here the change request process, which is the functionality that users use to change our data. But not only this, also an overview of our data, how we maintain the quality of our data. We provide some updates. We share with you how we've been performing, and even share with you integration with other business process. Upcoming OMS activities. So EV to OMS deltas should come in the upcoming months. We've revised and shortened our data quality targets through the good performance that we've been doing for the past 4 years. We continue with improving the user experience, both in our OMS portal and the API, but not only in the system, also in terms of data quality. And how did we read the information that you provide through our customer? How did we take into account the feedback that you sent to us? So just to highlight these 2 points, because this is a continuous improvement that we always do throughout the year on OMS documentation, and this was done mainly when we create this news item. It's a quick document that you, in case you'd like to have a holistic overview of what has changed in OMS for the past months, you go to this place, and there you have a note of new functionalities, new discussions, rules that may have changed, and the direct impact that this will have on your day-to-day activities. This is a summary of all this. And last but not least, this upgrade of an unaffiliated role. This will be definitely an improvement to new OMS users that come into contact with OMS for the first time, and they don't have to go through all the process of requesting our dedicated spore roles, just to simplify their life. And with this OMS presentation, I conclude the OMS presentation, and I think now we can take some of the questions that have not been addressed by my colleagues in Slido.
Thank you, Deborah. We had quite a huge interest regarding the OMS, so we have marked the questions that were highly voted by all the participants. So if you go by the stars in Slido, will be great. We also had quite a lot of questions regarding the publishing the presentations. Yes, the OMS presentation will be published on SPOR portal under the OMS documents, and we will publish it after this webinar. So you will be able to access it. As for the recordings, they will be published on EMEA YouTube channel, and the link to that was in this presentation and all the other presentations that we actually are presenting this week. So all this information is there. For the recordings, it might take a bit longer to be published, but I think we can do it sooner than the usual time. So maybe if you can check by the end of this month, they might be already there. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. So now we're going to go over a couple of questions that have not been addressed yet in our Slido platform. So I'll start with this very popular question. How would the industry know when EMA corrects and updates the address to OMS database? So this is something that it has been in our wish list for quite some time, but unfortunately we have not been able to prioritize, which is something that the RMS has, which is the subscription functionality. We want to implement this. We see the added value of having this subscription, any new version that we create of a certain record, so that the user could subscribe to a certain record and receive an automated message that a new version has been created. Unfortunately, this is still not available for OMS, but we're working towards prioritizing this in the upcoming months. Do you envision to also use other validation tools other than Address Doctor, as the address in the Address Doctor tool do not match the addresses on the official documentation? For example, GMP certificate, Chamber of Commerce. So here, what we've seen is that indeed we've seen small discrepancies between GMP certificates and even the National Business Registry documentation. However, we cannot forget that even though those documents, and we understand that those are legal documents, however, we use the local standards. This Address Doctor, this is information that we receive from each national postal service. So this is the reason why we rely on Address Doctor, because we have local authorities sending us information about what is the right postal code for that street level, what is the right sub-locality for a certain city. This is why you continue to see some discrepancies between GMP certificates and Chamber of Commerce documents, because OMS is going the extra mile. OMS is using information from the local authorities to targeting, to make sure that we have the correct information, the correct postal code, the correct details to a certain physical point in the map. For example, for the National Business Registry, the process, how does this work? The company go to the National Business Registry, and most of these business register they do not validate the data. So this is why organization name, we take it from there, but the location details, we take it from, basically it's the equivalent of the National Business Registry. We're talking the National Postal Service. This is the entity that tell us how to write an address, what is the best way, what are the standards, and this difference you'll continue to see it, but this will not be a reason for users to have any impact, any negative impact in regulatory procedures. And we continue uh, delivering webinars internal and externally to spread uh, the word in terms of our data quality standards, how we manage, how we validate the data, and to give reassurance that what we have in our system, there are small differences that can be accepted because they reflect the same data. I hope this addressed your question. OMS data rules in main organization names, Netherlands NL. I'm assuming this is a Dutch legal entity position, and Belgian legal entity visibility lead to health authority issue to GMP certificates not previously match legal entity names in National Business Registry and inconsistent with registered marketing authorization holders. How can this be improved? Here, I would probably ask you would have to do an assessment of case by case, because I can tell you that for Belgium legal entities, OMS is collecting the data exactly, and OMS is following the same way that the Belgium National Business Registry register the data. So for Belgium, even though we understand that GMP certificates, some of those GMPs, this is not new. That's why I can start. But if you still have any questions, I would advise you to contact us through ServiceNow. But for Belgium legal entities, we are maintaining the data exactly as the National Postal Service does, which is the name does not have the legal entity type, but the name is the name. The legal entity type is a different part, is not part of the main name. And OMS is following exactly the same rules as the local authorities. Now, we understand that previous issued GMP certificates may have been issued using these two components, organization name and legal entity type, but it's a matter of continuous improvement and understanding of our OMS rules, because if you go to OMS portal, you will see that all the Belgium legal entity, all the Belgium organizations, they will have the name without the legal entity type. And under the alternative name, you will be able to see a child record with the name and the legal entity type. But the way we publish the Belgium, in this case, this is the same thing for Belgium and French organizations. These are the two exceptions. And the OMS is following the same way. Each of those national business registries are publishing the data. I hope this clarifies, but if no, please let us know via ServiceNow. Is there a plan to notify the industry super users in future by email in case another user update your organization? This is again the subscription functionality that we hope to have in the future. When new addresses created via CTIS application, will it also reflect in OMS database? Is there a live synchronization between this? This is probably a question that need to be placed to CTIS colleagues. I know that CTIS has the change request functionality using their system, and it should lead to the creation of a change request directly in our database. But if this is not working, then it's something that I would kindly ask you to place the question to CTIS colleagues, because I can help you with any OMS related question, but it seems to be an issue with the CTIS application. We are aware this is there, but I don't know if there's any issue with this process. Okay. Are there any timelines to validate any location? No more valid? Well, this is where we count with your support, because as I said, most of the locations that we have, because they are not available in National Business Registry in some of our sources, of our validation sources. So we don't want to review all our locations using only the National Business Registry. Otherwise, we may be deactivating locations that the company is using. But just because they are not in our sources, it doesn't mean that is no longer valid. That's why most of the locations we cannot include as our currency check locations. We kindly ask you for your support to help us with this currency check. What happens if the reference source of information differed? Is there a prioritization of data sources? Yes, there is a prioritization of data sources. This is also reflected on our on that change request guidance, depending on the jurisdiction, if it's a EEA country, if it's a non-EEA country. But especially at organization level, we need to be very cautious, because because OMS manages legal entities, if we're talking an EEA country, we have access to the all National Business Registry, and we will register the record if we are able to validate against the National Business Registry. In terms of locations, it's a more, let's say, relaxed process, because we know that it's impossible for OMS to validate every single location, because some locations, they're only available in, for example, the company website when this happens. Sometimes this doesn't even happen. So a simply headed letter is sufficient for us to create the location, and we just standardize the location. Okay, how is it possible to check if an organization is registered as marketing or manufacturer? So this is one of the OMS key principles. In OMS, you cannot check, because OMS does not define roles. An organization, if you just use OMS, you will not be able to understand if this is being used as a marketing authorization holder, sponsor, manufacturer. You don't have this information. OMS just provides a list of organizations to be used in all sorts of consuming system, all sorts of regulatory activities. This classification needs to take place at consuming system level. Why is the organization information not the same as OMS dossier and business registry? What difference occur, and how can we deal with this? So between business registry and OMS, it's pretty straightforward, is what we've been talking. It's mainly data quality standards. In terms of dossier, I I trust it will be the same answer, that it's just a matter of data quality standards, nothing else. Because if it's not a matter of data quality standards, it's because probably it's a different legal entity, a different physical place, and the new record in OMS um, need to be created. But it's what we've been covering since the beginning. OMS standardized data, it will not create a copy of the supporting documentation. Uh, can NCA submit a change request on behalf of a company? Yes, you can. You can create anything. As long as you have the required, this is very important, as long as you have the supporting documentation, the necessary supporting documentation, you can create a hospital, you can create a university, you can create a marketing authorization holder, you can create a manufacturer, and you can create all necessary locations. The OMS was created in this way to facilitate the user experience, and NCAs can deactivate any record as long as we are able to validate this information, and we count with the supporting documentation for this. And last but not least, if there is any change in address, does address doctor will report automatically this change to AMA? Does this update on the address produce a change in OMS? If this statement is correct, is there any notification to place? So let me start with this last one, the notification. It's again the subscription level that we still do not have, but if there is a change in the address, does address doc, we do not receive an automated alert that this happened. The location does not change automatically into OMS. What can happen if we are by any chance, for example, doing a currency check and we try to read the latest version of the information, it's possible that we be updating this because it's the latest version of the data. However, if we always advise, if you are aware of a change that took place, please reach out via change request so that we can all work towards maintain the latest version of the data. And I think with this, we conclude our Q&A. Now I'll kindly ask you if you'd be so kind to please fill in a survey, or how did you find this webinar? Points, if there is at the end. Also, if you could share with us any points where we can improve, anything that you'd like to see in an upcoming webinar, I'll be happy to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you for the participation. We will leave the survey open until 4:05. So far, we received already great feedback from the previous sessions, so it will be absolutely fantastic if we could hear from you as well. Thank you.